today's video. Today we're going to take a step back from strictly Irish and go to another topic that is a favorite of mine, and that is the Titanic. So let's get into it. This is going to be a long video, so sit back, relax, have a cup of mead, sit by the fire, and enjoy. A ship, a tragedy, a legacy, the Titanic, and the journey of its lost souls. This is a little bit of an introduction before we get into the meat of this. This isn't going to be your normal Titanic video where you just do about the sinking or just about, what happened. We all know that. Yes, I'm going to get into a bit about it because, that has to happen. But this is going to primarily focus on what happened with the bodies. What happened in the aftermath. But let's take a dive, get the meat and potatoes out of the way before we can really dive into that. As of making this video, 113 years ago, the RMS Titanic, one of the most famous ships in history, it's a name that invokes images of opulence, tragedy, and the complexities of human ambition. It launched May 31st, 1911. It was hailed at the time as a marvel of modern engineering and design, representing the pinnacle of early 20th century transatlantic travel. However, the Titanic's maiden voyage, which began on April 10th, 1912, ended in a catastrophic disaster when the ship hit an iceberg in the North Atlantic Ocean on the night of April 14th. 1,500 plus people died. With this tragedy, the event shaped and fundamentally altered the landscape of maritime safety and left an undeniable mark on the collective memory and cultural consciousness of the world. The Titanic story is not merely a tale of a ship that sunk. It serves as a critical lens through which we can examine broader themes in maritime history, including the relationship between humanity and technology. The Titanic story has transcended its historical moment, becoming a significant cultural touchstone. The disaster inspired a wealth of literature, film, and art, shaping public perceptions of maritime disasters and human experience or loss. The Titanic has been depicted in countless works, ranging from historical accounts, scholarly analysis, and fictional narratives and blockbuster films. Each retelling reveals different facets of the tragedy, exploring themes of love, sacrifice, and fragility of life. The wreck site was discovered in 1985 by oceanographer Robert Ballard. It has become a focal point for ongoing research and exploration. The discovery of the ship's remains at a depth of about 12,500 feet provided new opportunities to study early 20th century maritime technology and human behavior during a crisis, and the physical and emotional impacts of the deep sea environments on shipwrecks. The wreck has revealed valuable insights into construction techniques at the time, materials used, and the conditions that contributed to the ship's sinking. Now, let's look at the construction of the Titanic. Before we delve into the physical construction, we need to look at the background of the White Star Line. The White Star Line, a prominent British shipping company, is best known for its luxurious ocean liners and its role in the development of transatlantic travel in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was founded in 1845. The company quickly established itself as a leader in maritime history and industry, known for its commitment to quality, safety, and innovation. The story of White Star Line is one of ambition, competition, and tragedy. It culminated in its most famous vessel, the RMS Titanic. This will explore the origins, growth, and challenges which face the White Star Line and provide context to the rest of the essay. The White Star Line, like I said, was established in 1845 by John Pickleton and Henry Cheffel in Liverpool, England. Initially, the company operated a fleet of cargo ships that transported goods between Britain and the US. The early years were marked with modest success, but it wasn't until the arrival of transatlantic passenger travel that the White Star Line began to flourish. The demand for comfortable and efficient travel between Europe and North America was rapidly increasing during this period, driven by the expansion of trade and the movement of people seeking new opportunities. In 1867, the White Star Line made a significant strategic decision by acquiring the Ocean Steam Navigation Company, which owned several passenger ships. This acquisition allowed White Star Line to enter the burgeoning market of transatlantic passenger travel, positioning the company as a key player in the industry. The fleet expanded to include vessels such as the RMS Oceanic, which launched in 1870. It was one of the first ships to offer luxurious accommodations for passengers. As competition grew in the transatlantic passenger market, the White Star Line recognized the need to differentiate itself by focusing on luxury and comfort. The late 19th century marked the beginning of the age of luxury liners, during which the shipping companies began to build larger and more opulent vessels. The White Star Line's commitment to provide superior travel became a defining characteristic of its brand. In 1888, the White Star Line introduced the RMS Teutonic, which was notably spacious design and lavish interiors. The ship set new standards for comfort and service, which attracted wealthy patrons and established the company's reputation for excellence. This focus on luxury continued with the launch of the RMS Majestic in 1890, which further solidified White Star Line's status as leader in industry. During this period, the company also began to implement innovative technologies to enhance safety and performance. The introduction of steam propulsion and advanced hull design allowed for faster and, more efficient travel across the Atlantic. The White Star Line positioned itself not only as a provider of luxury, but also as a pioneer in maritime technology. The White Star Line's emphasis on luxury and comfort inevitably led to a fierce rivalry with the Cunard Line, another major player in the transatlantic passenger market. Cunard has established itself as a competitor with its own series of luxury liners, including the RMS Mauretania and the RMS Lusitania. The competition between these two companies intensified as they sought to attract wealthy travelers and establish dominance in the lucrative transatlantic route. One of the most significant milestones in this rivalry occurred in 1907, when the White Star Line announced its plans to build a new class of ocean liners that refined luxury at sea. This class included 3 ships: the RMS Olympic, RMS Titanic, and RMS Britannic. The White Star Line aimed to create vessels that not only suppressed Cunard's offerings in terms of wealth size and luxury, but also emphasized safety and stability. The construction of these ships marks a turning point in the competitive landscape of transatlantic travel. The Olympic-class liners were designed to be the largest and most luxurious in the world, featuring unprecedented amenities and accommodations for passengers. This ambitious project captured the public's imagination and positioned White Star Line at the forefront of maritime innovation. The RMS Olympic, the first of the Olympic-class liners, was launched in 1911. It was celebrated for its grandeur and luxurious facilities, which included first-class dining rooms, lounges, and cabins that rivaled the finest hotels of the time. The Olympic quickly gained a reputation for excellence and was met with great enthusiasm from the public. Following the success of the Olympic, the world eagerly awaited the launch of its sister ship, the RMS Titanic. The Titanic was designed to be even more luxurious, included advancements such as swimming pool, a gym, and a famous grand staircase, which became the architectural highlight of the ship. The Titanic's Maiden Voyage was scheduled for April 1912 and marked the ultimate in luxury travel, with the tagline, "The Ship of Dreams." However, the Titanic's sinking on April 15, 1912, during its maiden voyage, profoundly affected the White Star Line. The loss of over 1,500 lives shocked the world and led to significant scrutiny of the company. The disaster also raised questions about safety standards in the shipping industry in general and the adequacy of lifeboat provisions. The White Star Line faced immense criticism and public outrage, impacting its reputation and operations. In the aftermath, the White Star Line was forced to confront the reality of its operations and the public's perception of maritime safety. The company cooperated with inquiries conducted by the British and American and Canadian governments to investigate the cause of the sinking. The inquiries revealed critical features in communication, emergency preparedness, and lifeboat provisions, leading to sweeping changes in maritime regulation. During this time, White Star Line sought to restore the public confidence in its operations. It implemented new safety protocols, including increased lifeboat capacity on its vessels and more rigorous training for crew members. The emphasis on safety became the central focus for the company in the years following the disaster. The White Star Line continued to operate its marine ships, including the RMS Olympic, which resumed transatlantic service and became the symbol of resilience in the face of adversity. Olympic remained in service until 1935, earning the reputation of reliability and safety. The company also introduced the RMS Britannic, which was originally intended as a sister ship to the Titanic, but was repurposed as a hospital ship during World War I. The Britannic was sunk in 1916 after hitting a mine, further underscoring the perils faced by marine operators during this tremendous and turbulent period. In the years following the disaster, White Star Line faced increasing challenges, including, of course, financial difficulties and competition from other shipping companies. The rise of air travel and the changing customer preference began to impact the demand for transatlantic passenger travel. In 1934, White Star Line merged with its longtime rival, Cunard Line, to form Cunard White Star Limited. This merger allowed the combined company to consolidate its resources, streamlining operations, and adapt to the evolving landscape of the shipping industry. The merger marked a new chapter for White Star Line and continued to operate under the Cunard name. The legacy of the White Star Line, however, remained a significant part of maritime history. The company's commitment to luxury and innovation have paved the way for future advancements in shipbuilding and passenger travel. The iconic ships of the White Star, and particularly the Titanic and Olympic, will continue to remain as symbols of that era. Now we can look at the design and engineering and the ambitious vision behind the creation of the Titanic. One of the most fascinating parts about the build, and I know I'm jumping ahead, but is the Titanic's anchor. There was a great marvel as the anchor was paraded from where it was built to the shipping yard. A team of 20 horses were used to pull the 15.5-ton anchor on a wagon through the streets of Northton to Durnley train station. The chain and fittings of the anchor weighed around 100 tons, and the anchor was forged in part by Northern-based Hinley and Sons. But let's get into more of the construction and how it was done. The Titanic, and all that, was constructed during a period marked by rapid advancements in engineering and shipbuilding technology. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw fierce competition among shipping lines, particularly, as we said, between White Star and Cunard Line. The design of the Titanic was driven by a clear vision to build the largest and most luxurious ship in the world. The White Star Line sought to cater to the wealthy passengers while simultaneously accommodating those traveling in third class. The ship was intended to offer unparalleled comfort and amenities, establishing a standard for transatlantic travel that would attract a diverse clientele. J. Bruce Ishmay, the managing director of White Star Line at the time, played a pivotal role in defining the Titanic's objectives. He envisioned a vessel that would not only be a technological marvel, but also a symbol of prestige and luxury. Its design aimed to create an environment that rivaled the finest hotels, with the grand dining rooms, elegant lounges, state-of-the-art facilities. The design was a result of collaboration between several key figures, including the ship's architects, Thomas Andrews, and naval architect Edward Wildon. The ship was constructed by Harland and Wolff, a prominent shipbuilding company based in Belfast, Ireland, known for its expertise in building large vessels. It measured approximately 882 feet. That's 269 meters in length, 92 feet, 28 meters in width, and had a gross tonnage of about 46,000 tons. It was designed with a double bottom and a series of watertight compartments to enhance safety. The ship was divided into 16 compartments, with 15 of them equipped with watertight doors that could be closed in the event of a breach. This feature was intended to prevent the flooding and kept the ship afloat even if several compartments were compromised. The hull, constructed from high-quality steel plates, were riveted together using over 3 million rivets. Its design emphasized stability and strength. Incorporating a deep draft that allowed for better performance in rough seas, the ship's bow was designed with a sharp profile to cut through the waves, while the stern featured a more rounded design for aesthetic appeal. The interior was a testament to the opulence of luxury associated with the 20th century. The ship's interiors were designed by a team of skilled designers, including renowned architect Edward A. McCaffrey. The first-class accommodations were particularly extravagant, featuring grand staircases, ornate lounges, and luxurious dining rooms. The grand staircase, often referred to as the Staircase of Dreams, was a striking feature of the ship. It was designed with intricate woodwork, a glass dome, and elegant lighting, creating a stunning visual centerpiece. The first-class dining room was equally as impressive, boasting a capacity of 500 diners and adorned with fine china and crystal. In addition, the Titanic also provided comfortable accommodations for second and third class passengers. The layout was designed to ensure that all passengers, regardless of class, experienced a level of comfort and service that was unprecedented for ocean travel. Third class was more basic than those of first class, but were still superior to any contemporary ships, reflecting White Star Line's commitment to passenger comfort. The Titanic was powered by a combination of steam engines and turbines. It features 2 reciprocating steam engines and 1 central steam turbine engine, which worked together to provide propulsion. The steam engines were responsible for driving the outer propellers, while the turbines powered the central propeller. This configuration allowed Titanic to achieve a max speed of approximately 23 knots, or 26.5 miles an hour, making it one of the fastest ships of its time. The steam engines were fueled by coal, and an extensive coal bunker system was designed to store the large quantities of fuel needed for transatlantic voyages. The engineering team employed innovative designs to optimize efficiency for the engines, and ensuring that the Titanic could complete its journeys in a timely manner. Despite the Titanic's reputation as unsinkable, the design included several safety features intended to enhance passenger safety. The watertight compartments, allowing the ship to remain afloat. The design of the ship emphasized stability with the low center of gravity and wide beam to minimize the risk of capsizing. However, the Titanic's safety features were ultimately inadequate in the face of a disaster that unfolded on its maiden voyage. The ship only carried 20 lifeboats, which was way insufficient for the number of passengers and crew on board. This decision was based on the belief that the lifeboats were primarily for ferrying passengers to safety, rather than a means of full evacuation. The regulations at the time did not require ships to have enough lifeboats for all passengers, a fact that would have dire consequences during the sinking. The Titanic was also equipped with advanced navigation systems, including wireless telegraph system that allowed for communication with other ships and shore stations. This technology was critical to ensuring safe navigation and coordinating rescue events in the case of emergencies. The wireless operator Jack Phillips played a vital role in sending distress signals during the sinking, although many nearby vessels failed to respond promptly due to their distance or lack of proper radio equipment. The ship also used advanced compasses and navigational instruments to pilot its course across the Atlantic. The Titanic's crew were trained in navigation and seamanship, although the tragic events of the sinking highlighted the limitations of human judgment in the face of unforeseen circumstances. Now, let's take a look at the actual construction process. The first step was preparation of the dry dock at Harland & Wolff shipyard in Belfast. This was an undertaking huge to be known. It was a massive structure that would allow workers to build the ship in a controlled environment. The dry dock was essential for keeping the ship stable and free from the challenges posed by tides and weather conditions. The construction of the dry dock itself was monumental, requiring significant engineering and labor. Once completed, the keel, like a foundational structure of the ship, was laid in the dry dock. This involved positioning large steel plates that would form the backbone of the Titanic. With the keel in place, workers began constructing the hull. This process involved assembling the steel plates and securing them with rivets. This was a labor-intensive task, considering there was over 300 million rivets. The riveting process was physically demanding, often required workers to work in, uncomfortable positions. Despite the challenges, the workforce displayed remarkable dedication and skill, taking pride in their craftsmanship. As the hull began to take shape, the next phase involved the installation of the ship's machinery. The Titanic was powered by a combination of steam engines and turbines, which required careful engineering and precise installation. The engine room located at the aft of the ship housed 2 reciprocating steam engines and 1 central turbine engine. The steam engines were responsible for driving the outer propellers, while the turbine powered the central propeller. This configuration allowed the Titanic to achieve its maximum speeds. The installation of the engines was a complex task that required collaboration between engineers and mechanics. The engines had to be connected to the propellers and boulders, and the entire system had to be thoroughly tested to ensure proper functionality. While the hull and machinery were being constructed, the ship's interior was also taking shape. The Titanic was designed to be a floating palace, featuring grand public spaces, luxurious cabins. In addition, the construction of the Titanic required massive and skilled workforce. Hartford and Wolff employed thousands of workers, including shipbuilders, engineers, and craftsmen. The labor force at Harland and Wolff was diverse, with workers from various backgrounds and skill levels. Many were local residents of Belfast, while others traveled from different parts of the UK and beyond in search of employment. work conditions in the shipyard were challenging. Workers had to contend with heavy machinery, loud noises, and physically demanding tasks. Safety standards were not as stringent as they are today, and accidents were not uncommon. Despite the challenges, the workforce displayed remarkable dedication and skill. Many workers took pride in their craftsmanship and the opportunity to contribute to a significant maritime project. The camaraderie among the workers fostered a sense of community within the shipyard as they worked together towards a common goal. The construction was not merely a feat of human labor, but also a showcase of technological innovations that defined the shipbuilding industry at the time. During the 20th century, the techniques were evolving rapidly. The use of steel instead of wood marked a significant advancement, providing greater strength and durability. Titanic's construction employed modern techniques such as use of electric cranes, mechanized tools, which streamlined the assembly process. The Titanic was designed with the safety features like the watertight compartments, double-bottomed hull. These were intended to enhance the ship's ability to withstand flooding in the event of an accident. However, the tragedy of the Titanic sinking highlighted the limitations of these safety measures. While the ship was equipped with lifeboats, the number were not enough. On May 31st, 1911, in a grand ceremony attended by dignitaries, media, and thousands of spectators, the Titanic was launched. The launch marked a significant milestone in the shipbuilding process and was celebrated as a triumph of engineering. The launch ceremonies featured speeches, music, and festivities, creating an atmosphere of excitement and anticipation. The ship slid into the waters of Belfast Lough, where it would undergo sea trials before its maiden voyage. The launch of the Titanic was a moment of pride for Hartland and Wolff and the city of Belfast. It symbolized not only the accumulation of years of hard work, but also the aspirations of an era that celebrated innovation and progress. Following its launch, the Titanic underwent a series of sea trials, test performance, and safety features. These sea trials were essential for identifying any issues that needed to be addressed before the ship's maiden voyage. It was tested for speed, maneuverability, stability. Engineers and naval architects monitored the ship's performance, gathering data to ensure that it met the specifications outlined during the design phase. The Titanic's performance exceeded expectations, demonstrating its capacity for speed and stability. However, the trials also revealed some areas for improvement. Prompt advancements and adjustments to the ship's systems and equipment. As they concluded, the focus shifted to the final preparations for the Titanic's maiden voyage. This involved completing interior finishings, conducting safety drills, and ensuring that all systems were fully operational. The ship's crew underwent training to familiarize themselves with the ship's layout and emergency procedures. The emphasis on safety and preparedness was critical, especially in the light of Titanic's auspicious reputation of being unsinkable. Now we will take a look at its maiden voyage. On April 10th, 1912, the RMS Titanic, a vessel that would soon become synonymous with luxury and tragedy, set sail from Southampton, England, on its maiden voyage across the Atlantic Ocean. This moment marked not only just the beginning of a journey for the ship itself, but also the culmination of years of meticulous planning and design. The Titanic was not merely a ship. It was a floating palace, a marvel of engineering that promised to redefine ocean travel. As the ship prepared to depart, a sense of excitement and anticipation filled the air, mingling with the realities of human ambition and the uncertainties of fate. Southampton, a bustling port city in the southern coast of England, was the ideal departure point for Titanic's maiden voyage. This city had a history as a gateway for transatlantic travel, serving as a hub for passengers beyond and bound for the New World. The docks were alive with activity as ships loaded and unloaded goods, and travelers who made their way to various vessels. It was here the Titanic would embark on its journey to New York City, with a stop in Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, Ireland. The day of departure dawned clear and crisp, typical of early spring in England. As soon as the sun rose over the horizon, it cast a golden hue on the ship, illuminating its majestic hull and towering smokestacks. The Titanic was a sight to behold, measuring 882 feet in length and towering over many of the ships docked in the harbor. Its sheer size and grandeur spoke of the ambitions of its builders, Harald and Wolff, and the aspiration of White Star Line. The Titanic was carrying a diverse array of passengers, each with their own hopes and dreams for the journey. Among them were some of the wealthiest people at the time, eager to experience the luxurious accommodations that the ship promised. First-class passengers including prominent figures such as John Jacob Alabaster IV, a businessman and real estate developer, Isidor Strauss, owner of Macy's department store, and Benjamin Goodheim, a mining magnate. These individuals were accustomed to the finest luxuries and were drawn to Titanic's reputation as the epitome of comfort. In addition to first-class travelers, the Titanic also accommodates second and third-class passengers. Second-class accommodations were designed to be comfortable and spacious, catering to the growing middle class. Third-class passengers, often immigrants seeking a new life in America, were offered basic, yet comfortable quarters. The ship's design reflected a commitment to provide a level of comfort unheard of at the time, regardless of class. The crew of the Titanic was composed of approximately 900 members, including officers, engineers, stewards, and galley staff. Captain Edward Smith, a seasoned mariner with decades of experience, was at the helm. Known for his calm demeanor and competence, Captain Smith was well respected among his crew and passengers alike. He had been with White Star Line for many years and was entrusted with the command of the Titanic for its maiden voyage. In the days ahead and leading up to Titanic's departure, preparations were in full swing. The ship underwent final inspections. The crew engaged in last-minute training drills to ensure that everyone was familiar with their responsibilities. The ship was stoked with provisions, including food, water, and supplies for the journey. The grand dining room was adorned with fine china and glassware, while luxurious lounges and cabins were furnished to create an atmosphere of opulence. On the morning of April 10th, the atmosphere at the docks was electric with anticipation. Passengers arrived at the port, some accompanied by family and friends who had come to bid them farewell. The docks were filled with the sounds of laughter, excitement, and the hustle and bustle of travelers. As the passengers boarded the ship, they were greeted by members of the crew, who assisted them with their luggage and directed them to their cabins. At approximately 12 p.m., the Titanic was ready to depart Southampton. The ship's whistle blew, signaling that it was time to cast off. Onlookers gathered at the docks, while friends and family waved goodbye to those embarking on the journey. The ship's decks were filled with passengers eager to take in the sights and sounds of the harbor as the Titanic prepared to leave the dock. As the last lines were cast off, Titanic slowly began to move away from the quay. A massive vessel guided gracefully into the water, its hull cutting through the waves with ease. The ship's propellers churned the water, creating a frothy wake as it made its way to the Solent and the strait that separates the Isle of Wight from the mainland of England. The ship's departure was marked by sounds of cheering and applause from those on board and those watching from the docks. Flags fluttered in the breeze, and the ship's band played lively music to celebrate the occasion. The atmosphere was jubilant, filled with hope and excitement as the passengers settled into their new surroundings. As Titanic navigated the waters, passengers explored the ship's luxurious amenities. First-class passengers were particularly enamored with the opulence of their accommodations, which included private suites, a grand dining room, and lavish lounges. The ship was designed to cater to the affluent, offering a level of comfort never been seen. The first-class dining room passengers marveled at the elegant decor and dining experience. The tables were set with exquisite china, silverware, and crystal glasses, creating an ambience of the finest restaurants. Passengers in Sora enjoyed gourmet meals prepared by the ship's skilled chefs, savoring the culinary delights that would become the hallmark of the Titanic experience. Meanwhile, second-class passengers enjoyed their own comfortable quarters, with spacious dining rooms and lounges allowing them to socialize and relax during the journey. Third-class accommodations, while more modest, still offered amenities that were superior to those found on many ships in the era. The Titanic's design aimed to ensure that all passengers, regardless of class, experienced the same sense of comfort and hospitality. As the ship left the Solent and entered the open sea, the excitement of the journey began to settle in. Passengers gathered on the decks to take in the breathtaking views of the coastline, the vast expanse of the ocean, and the ship's immense size and grandeur of its design left many in awe. As they contemplated the adventure that laid ahead, the departure from Southampton marked not only the beginning of the journey, but also a moment of reflection for many passengers. For some, it was an opportunity to start anew. Immigrants seeking better lives in America, leaving behind their homes and families in search of opportunity. For others, it was a chance to indulge in the luxury and comfort that Titanic promised, a vacation of a lifetime. As the ship sailed further away from the English coast, passengers engaged in conversation, shared stories, and formed new friendships. The atmosphere was filled with optimism and excitement as everyone looked forward to the upcoming days at sea. The Titanic was not only just a vessel, it was a symbol of progress and modernity, embodying the aspirations of a generation. As the day turned to evening, the Titanic continued its voyage, and preparations for dinner began. The first-class dining room was transformed into a grand setting with soft lighting and elegant table settings, creating an inviting atmosphere. Passengers dressed in their finest attire, eager to experience the luxurious dining options available to them. The ship's band played soothing music, enhancing the ambience as the passengers gathered to enjoy their meals. The menu featured a variety of gourmet dishes, showcasing the culinary expertise of the ship's chefs. Guests dined on multiple courses, including delicacies that reflected the opulence of Titanic. After dinner, many passengers made their way to the lounges and common areas to socialize, play games, or simply enjoy each other's company. The atmosphere was lively and filled with laughter and conversation. As people shared their experience and dreams, the ship's crew continued to provide exceptional service, ensuring that every passenger felt welcomed and attended to. As the first day at sea came to a close, there was a sense of tranquility aboard the Titanic. The ship guided and glided smoothly through the waters of the Atlantic, and the night sky was filled with stars. Many passengers took to the decks to enjoy the fresh sea air and marveled at the beauty of the ocean under the moonlight. However, beneath the surface of calm, an undercurrent of fate loomed. The Titanic had set sail on a journey that would soon become one of the most tragic tales in maritime history. The days that followed would be marked by both exuberant luxury and unforeseen disaster. Now let's look at some key figures aboard the Titanic, as it helps us paint a picture of the social dynamics of the time, the class distinctions that were prominent during the early 20th century, and the human stories that emerged from this monumental event. In the first class section of Titanic, it was a realm of luxury designed to cater to the wealthy elite of society. The accommodations were lavish. The most notable were John Jacob Alabaster IV, one of the wealthiest men in America at the time of Titanic's voyage. He was a businessman, real estate developer, investor, writer, lieutenant colonel in the Spanish-American War, and a prominent figure in New York society. Astor was traveling to America with his 19-year-old pregnant wife, Madeline, after, a European honeymoon. He did not survive the sinking, but his wife did, and later gave birth to their son. Another one was Isidor Straus. He was the co-owner of Macy's department store alongside his wife Ida. The couple was well known in New York society, and they were celebrated for their philanthropy and community involvement. When the Titanic began to sink, Isidor insisted that his wife get into a lifeboat. She famously refused to leave him, stating, "We have been together for over 40 years, and where you go, I go." Both perished in the disaster. These were the two couples that you see laying in a bed, holding hands. Benjamin Gunderheim was a prominent American businessman and member of the wealthy Gunderheim family. Known for their mine industrial interest, he was traveling with his mistress, Lorraine Anhut, and reportedly dressed in formal evening wear as the ship sank, stating, "We're dressed up in our best and are prepared to go down like gentlemen." Gunderheim did not survive the sinking, while Albert was rescued. Thomas Andrews was chief designer of the Titanic and managing director of Harrowing Wolff, the shipbuilding company that constructed the vessel. He was on board during the Maiden Voyage to observe the ship's performance. Andrews was known for his attention to detail and his commitment to safety. Reports indicated that he was last seen in first-class smoking room, urging passengers to evacuate. He sadly did not survive. One person that we will talk about, she's well known, so I won't go much into her story, is Molly Brown. She was his first-class passenger. She survived the sinking and is known historically as the unsinkable Molly Brown, because this wasn't her first time on a ship that sank. The last first-class passenger that we need to talk about is Captain Edward Smith. He was a ship's captain and had a long, distinguished career with the White Star Line. He was regarded as an experienced and capable seaman. Having captained numerous ships during his tenure, historians note that he was well respected by both crew and passengers alike. As the ship sank, he was seen encouraging passengers to board the lifeboats and ensuring that as many people as possible would be rescued. Captain Smith went down with his ship. Now let's look at second class and look at some of their people. Some notable second-class passengers included Lorne Beasley, an English school teacher and author. He was traveling to America to visit his friends and further his career. Beasley survived the sinking and later wrote a book titled The Loss of the Titanic, in which he detailed his experience. His accounts provided valuable insights into the events surrounding the disaster and the panic that ensued. Edward and Elizabeth Roth were a married couple from England who were traveling to America for a new beginning. Edward was a businessman, and the couple was excited about their future. They both survived the sinking, but their experience was traumatic, and they later recounted the chaos that unfolded during the evacuation. Now, more of the not-so-lucky, the third-class passengers. They're often immigrants, and despite simpler conditions, many third-class passengers enjoyed the sense of camaraderie, and notable ones included Peter and Catherine McGowan, who were Irish immigrants traveling to America with their 3 children. They sought a better life and new opportunities. The family did not survive. But their story reflects on the hopes and dreams of many third-class passengers who boarded the Titanic in search of a brighter future. Thomas Hogg was a Scottish farmer traveling with his wife Lillian and their children. They were also seeking a new life in America. The family was among the fortunate third-class passengers who survived the disaster. They later recounted their harrowing experience as they tried to escape the sinking ship. Now, we can't not talk about the hero, some of the unsung heroes of the Titanic and the disaster, the crew. And its crew played a vital role in ensuring the safety and comfort of those passengers. There was 900 individuals. We've already talked about the captain, but let's get into some more. The first is First Officer Wood, and he was responsible for the navigation and safety of the vessel. He was a seasoned sailor and had previously served several White Star Line ships. Murdoch was on the bridge at the time of the collision with the iceberg. He is often remembered for his calm demeanor and decision-making during the crisis. Eyewitnesses' accounts suggest he urged the passengers to board the lifeboats and worked tirelessly to manage the evacuation. Charles Lightroller was a second officer on the Titanic and became known for his role in the evacuation during the disaster. He was the highest-ranking officer to survive the sinking and was later recognized for his bravery and leadership. Lightroller made several trips back and forth to the ship to help passengers evacuate. Even after sustaining injuries from the chaos, his testimony followed the disaster provided critical insights into the events that unfolded. Herbert Pittman served as third officer. He was responsible for various tasks, including overseeing the lifeboat drills, managing the crew during the sinking. Pittman played a significant role in directing passengers to safety and ensuring the lifeboats were launched. He survived the disaster and later recounted his experience, emphasizing the confusion and panic. Now, not to be confused with Captain Edward Smith, Chief Engineer. Edward Smith was responsible for the ship's engines, mechanical systems, and he played a critical role in maintaining the ship's performance and ensuring that everything was functioning properly. During the sinking, he worked tirelessly in the engine room, trying to keep the ship operational as long as possible. He did not survive. Violet Jessup was one of the ship's stewardesses and is well known for her remarkable survival story. She had previously served the sinking of the RMS Olympic, another White Star Line ship, later survived the Britannic, which sank during World War I. On the Titanic, she was responsible for care of first class. During the disaster, she helped many people as she could and was eventually rescued. Jessup's resilience became legendary, and she later recounted her experience in her autobiography. The one group of people that we really need to give credit to is the band. None of the members of the band survived. Through survivor stories and recounts, we get a sense of their heroism and bravery as they played until the ship went under the water. The final song that was played was the song Nearer, My God, to Thee. Now, let's break down the timeline from that first day on April 10th to April 15th. As the Titanic set sail from Southampton on April 10th, The day was marked by excitement, anticipation. They grew, they gathered. Meanwhile, as night fell, on that first night, everybody was still in awe and loving what was going on. The Titanic's journey continued smoothly for the next few days, while the passengers reveling in luxury of their surroundings. The ship was equipped with many amenities, swimming pools, gyms. On April 11th, the Titanic sailed steadily towards the first scheduled stop. In Cherbourg, France, passengers awoke to a beautiful day, and many took advantage of the opportunity to explore the ship. The first class lounge was particularly popular, with guests enjoying an afternoon tea and engaging in conversations about their lives, travels, and aspirations. In the dining room, the menu featured a lavish selection of dishes, including filet mignon, oysters, and a variety of pastries. The culinary team took great pride providing exceptional dining experience. The passengers were eager to indulge in the multi-course meals. As the day progressed, the ship's crew conducted safety drills and inspections, ensuring that everything was in order. The crew members, including Captain Smith and First Officer Murdoch, were attentive to the needs of the passengers and focused on maintaining smooth operation. The afternoon of April 12th, the Titanic made its scheduled stop in Cherbourg to pick up additional passengers. The harbor was bustling as activity as smaller boats ferried new travelers to the ship. Among those boarding was prominent figures and families eager to experience the luxury. Once in the amenities, the grand staircase became a popular gathering spot where people marveled at its ornate design and took pictures to commemorate their journey. As night fell, the ship's band played lively tunes in the first-class lounge, creating an inviting atmosphere. Passengers danced and mingled, celebrating the joy and being at sea. However, there were whispers among some of the crew members about the ship's speed, the Titanic known to be racing towards New York, aiming to set a new record for the fastest transatlantic crossing. On April 13th, the Titanic continued its voyage, navigating through cold waters of the Atlantic. The day marked by clear skies and brilliant sun, creating a picturesque backdrop for the passengers. Many took the opportunity to enjoy the fresh air on the decks, while some lounged in the deck chairs and others participated in games and activities organized by the crew. In first class, the atmosphere was one of celebration and luxury. Passengers enjoyed another exquisite meal. The dining room was filled with laughter and conversations. Guests shared stories and made new acquaintances. On second class, passengers continued to enjoy their experience, forming friendships and connections that, for the ones that survived, would last beyond the voyage. The camaraderie among the passengers created a sense of community as they shared their hopes for the future and their reasons for traveling to America. In third class, the atmosphere was equally as lively. Families gathered in common areas, sharing meals and stories, children playing together, creating a sense of joy amidst the uncertainty of their new lives in a foreign land. The sense of adventure was palpable, as many of the third-class passengers were excited about the opportunities that awaited them in America. As night approached, the ship's crew conducted their regular inspections and safety checks. Captain Smith and his officers were confident in Titanic's design, believing it to be one of the safest ships ever built. The ship's watertight compartments and advanced safety features were seen as a guarantee against disaster. However, the Titanic was sailing through an area of unknown icebergs, particularly in April. The warnings had been issued to the ships in the vicinity. Despite this, the Titanic maintained speed as the crew aimed to reach New York ahead of schedule. The passengers were blissfully unaware of the danger that lay ahead. Caught up in the luxury and excitement of their voyage, as the evening of April 13th unfolded, the Titanic was a floating palace filled with sound of laughter, music. Passengers enjoyed the last evening on board, unaware of the pending doom that awaited them. In the first-class lounge, the ship's band played. The second-class passengers gathered in common areas just like the night before, enjoying stories The atmosphere was still warm and inviting. In third class, it continued to bound over shared meals, experienced, danced, and throughout the day the Titanic received several warnings about icebergs in the vicinity. The messengers were relayed to the bridge, where the officers were aware of the potential dangers. However, the Titanic was traveling at a high speed, and Captain Smith and his crew felt confident in the ship's ability to navigate safely through the icy waters. As the night wore on, the atmosphere aboard the ship remained carefree and celebratory. Passengers continued to enjoy their meals, socialize, while the crew attended their duties with efficiency and professionalism. The Titanic was operating like a well-oiled machine, embodying the pinnacle of maritime engineering. As April 14th transitioned into the early hours of April 15th, the Titanic continued its journey across the Atlantic. The engine room hummed steadily, and the ship cut gracefully through the water. The sky was clear, and the stars shone brightly above, creating a serene and beautiful backdrop. However, the tranquility of night was deceptive, and the icy waters of the North Atlantic held hidden dangers, and the Titanic was sailing into a perilous situation. The warnings about icebergs had been received, but the ship maintained its speed, driven by the desire to New York ahead of schedule. As the passengers were tired in their cabins for the night, many took a moment to reflect on their journey. The Titanic had brought together individuals from all walks of life, each with their own stories and dreams. Some were excited about new beginnings, while others simply enjoyed the luxury and comfort of their surroundings. In first-class suites, passengers settled into the luxurious accommodations, lured by the rhythmic sounds of the ship cutting through the waters. In second class, families gathered to share their hopes and aspirations, bonding over the shared experiences of the voyage. In third class, laughter filled the common areas, the children played, and the adults shared stories of their past and dreams of the future. As night deepened, the ship continued to sail towards its destination, unaware of the fate that awaited it just hours later. Molly Brown, also known as the unsinkable Molly Brown, was heard saying, "It felt like a sudden jolt. I thought it was a bump and the ship would continue on." First Officer Murdoch was noted to be calm. Thomas Andrews was heard saying, "It was a loud grinding noise as the iceberg hit. I knew instantly that we'd hit something serious." Now, let's take a look at the sinking. The RMS Titanic's maiden voyage was marked by a series of significant events leading up to its tragic sinking in the early hours of April 15th, 1912. We're going to look at the timeline of the critical moments between April 14th and the early hours of April 15th, capturing the atmosphere aboard the ship and the events that would lead to one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history. 8 a.m. The Titanic continues its journey across the North Atlantic, enjoying clear skies, calm seas. Passengers are in high spirits, taking advantage of the ship's amenities and enjoying breakfast in the dining rooms. 10 a.m. The Titanic receives a series of ice warnings from the other ships in the vicinities. The messages are relayed to the bridge, where First Officer Murdoch and the Captain Smith are taking note of them. 11 a.m. A warning is received from the SS Californian, which is nearby. The Californian's Captain Stanley Lord reports that they have stopped due to ice and advises the Titanic to reduce speed. However, the Titanic is traveling at full speed, aimed for making a record crossing. 12 p.m. The Titanic's dining room is bustling with passengers enjoying lunch. The atmosphere is lively with conversations about the ship, the journey, and the upcoming arrival in New York. 1:30 p.m. The ship's band plays music on the deck, and passengers gather to enjoy the sunny weather. Many take the opportunity to socialize, play deck games, or simply relax in the sun. 1500. Another ice warning is received from the American ship Mesbia. The warning is communicated to the bridge, but the Titanic continues to maintain its speed. The officers believe that the ship is safe to navigate through the sea. 1730. The Titanic's dining service begins in first class, with passengers enjoying a luxurious multi-course meal. The dining room is elegantly set, and the atmosphere is filled with laughter and conversation. 7:30 p.m., 1930. The passengers continue to enjoy their evening with music, dancing. Many are dressed in formal attire, embracing the elegance of their surroundings. 9 p.m. The Titanic's crew conducts routine inspections and safety checks. Some crew members express concern about the speed, particularly in light of ice warnings. 2200. Passengers in first class continue to socialize in the lounges. The ship's band plays lively tunes, and many guests are reluctant to retire for the evening. 2230. The lights in the dining room dim as the evening festivities wind down. Some passengers head to their cabins, while others linger in the lounges, enjoying the ambience of the ship. April 15th, 1912. 12 a.m. The Titanic sails smoothly through the icy waters of the North Atlantic. The ship's crew remains vigilant, but the atmosphere on board is relaxed, with passengers unworried about the warnings they had received earlier. 12:05 a.m. The last ice warning of the night is received from the Californian, advising the Titanic to slow down due to presence of icebergs. 12:15. The Titanic lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, are stationed in the crow's nest. They scan the horizon for any potential hazards, but visibility is limited due to darkness. 12:40. The Titanic is traveling approximately 22 knots. Continuing its course towards New York, the crew is focused on maintaining the ship's speed, and passengers are awake, enjoying the night. 12:47. Lookout Frederick Fleet spots an iceberg directly ahead. It rings a warning bell 3 times. He shouts down to the bridge, alerting the officers of the impending danger. 12:50. First Officer Murdoch orders the ship to turn hard to starboards and attempts to slow down the engines. However, the Titanic cannot avoid the collision. The Titanic strikes the iceberg at 12:52 on the starboard side. The impact is felt throughout the ship. Many passengers are jolted from their seats. Some believe it's just a minor bump, while others sense the gravity of the situation. 12:55 a.m. Captain Smith assesses the damage and instructs the crew to check the ship's compartments. He quickly realizes the extent of the damage and that the ship is taking on water. 1 a.m. The ship's officers began assessing the situation and start preparing for evacuation. Lifeboats are readied, and crew members are tasked with getting passengers to safety. 1:10 a.m. The first lifeboats are lowered into the water. Many passengers are still unaware of the seriousness of the situation and are initially reluctant to leave the ship. 1:15 a.m. The crew starts to instruct passengers to put on life jackets and head to the upper deck for evacuation. The atmosphere is chaotic as people began to realize the severity of the situation. 1:20. Lifeboats are launched with a small number of passengers, as many first-class passengers are uncertain of the situation and are hesitant to leave the safety of the ship. 1:30 a.m. The crew urges women and children to board lifeboats first. Some passengers attempt to return to their cabins to retrieve personal belongings, but the crew advises against it. 1:45 a.m. As more lifeboats are launched, panic begins to set among the remaining passengers. The ship is noticeably listing to one side, and many realize that the Titanic may not survive much longer. 2 a.m. The last lifeboat is launched. The ship's band plays music on deck in an attempt to calm the passengers, while the crew members continue to assist with the evacuation. 2:05 a.m. The Titanic's lights begin to flicker. As the ship's power system fails, the bow is submerged and the water is rushing into the ship. Passengers are urged to jump into the water or cling to debris. 2:10 a.m. Captain Smith remains on the bridge, directing crew and encouraging passengers to abandon ship. Many crew members continue to assist the passengers, while others prepare for their own survival. 2:17 a.m. The band plays Nearer, My God, to Thee. As the Titanic's stern raises out of the water and the ship breaks apart, the final moments are filled with chaos and despair as the ship sinks into the icy depths of the Atlantic. 2:20. The Titanic disappears beneath the waves, leaving only wreckage and debris on the surface. Survivors cling to lifeboats and floating debris, waiting for rescue. 2:30 a.m. The RMS Carpathia, a nearby ship, receives the distress call from Titanic and begins to navigate. The rescue operations are underway, but time is critical as the ice continue its voyage without issue. For others, particularly those in first class, the luxurious atmosphere of the ship led to a sense of security that made it hard for them to fathom the gravity of the situation. Safety. Reports from survivors indicate that some of the first-class passengers initially dismissed the warnings, believing that Titanic was unsinkable and that the ship of such grandeur could not possibly urge their wives to leave, while they stayed behind. Isidor Strauss, corner of Macy's, famously refused to board a lifeboat without his wife, who insisted he saved himself. Their heartbreaking decision to remain together exemplified the spirit of love and commitment in the future. More modest, passengers shared a sense of camaraderie. Many were immigrants. As Titanic sailed smoothly through the Atlantic, passengers enjoyed a festive atmosphere. However, some of the passengers noted an underlying tension. I overheard discussions among the crew about icebergs and easily, yet it was easy to forget when surrounded by such luxury and excitement. I had a problem and warned the ringing bell. It felt like a sudden jolt, recalled passenger Mary Brown, who would later become known as the unsinkable Molly Brown. I thought it was just a bump, and the ship would continue on in the But we're all convinced that Titanic was unsinkable. As crew members began to assess the damage, there was a mix. Isidor Strauss, who'd been enjoying an evening. We were told to stay calm, but I could see the worry in the crew's eyes. Isidor insisted that I get into a lifeboat, Ida says, but I refused to leave him. We had been together for over 40 years, and I wouldn't lie and hate to leave his side now. As the gravity of the situation became apparent, crew members began to organize the evacuation. I remember hearing the crew shout for women and children to go first, said Molly Brown. But there was so much confusion, people were scared, and it was hard to know what to do. In first class, some passengers hesitated. We were all in shock, and many thought it was just a drill, said Beasley. I kept urging people to leave, but they were reluctant. In third class, the situation was even more dire. Many passengers were unaware of the sinking until it was too late. We were in the lower decks, and we could hear commotion above, recalled Peter McGowan. We were finally realizing it was happening. It was pandemonium. The gates were locked, and we were struggling to get to the upper deck. Amid the chaos, numerous acts of bravery emerged. Crew members, including officers, worked tirelessly to maintain order. The men were shouting for everyone to get into lifeboats. They were trying to keep the panic at bay. But it was difficult, Beasley said. One notable act involved Charles Lighthill, the second officer. He took charge of the lifeboat operations to ensure as many men and women and children were evacuated. He was calm and collected, noted Violet Jessup. He kept urging us to get into lifeboats. He didn't hesitate to put himself in danger. As the Titanic continued to take on water, the situation grew increasingly desperate. Passengers clung to hope. I remember looking out at the lifeboats lowered and realizing that many people would not make it, said McGowan. The fear was palpable. In the final moments, the ship began to list dramatically. I felt as though the ship was alive and fighting against the water, said Andrews. I knew we were losing the battle. Passengers struggled to hold the ship's bow and submerged, and the stern rose ominously out into the air. By the time the last lifeboats were launched, the Titanic was in dire straits. I saw so many people still on the deck when my heart broke, said Brown. We were told that there was no time to go back for anyone else. The last lifeboat left with only a handful of people. In those final moments, many passengers faced the reality. I clung to my husband, and we promised to stay together, said Ida Strauss. But as the ship began to go down, I felt a sense of resignation. When the Titanic broke apart and sank, Beasley recalled, it was a terrifying moment. One moment we were on this magnificent ship, and the next it was gone. Survivors reported hearing a deafening roar as the ship disappeared into the icy depths. In the chaos, many passengers were thrown into frigid waters. I remember feeling the cold water envelop me, said Brown. It was shocking. I thought I was going to die. Many others managed to cling to pieces of debris or lifeboats, desperately trying to stay afloat. As dawn broke, the survivors clung to hope as the icy water, as they waited for rescue. I felt a mixture of fear and determination, said McGowan. I knew I had to survive for my family. Many survivors reported seeing lifeboats with only a few people aboard, while others were lost in darkness. The RMS Carpathia, a nearby ship, received the distress call and began navigating toward the Titanic's last location. When we heard the sound of a ship approaching, there was a moment of pure relief, said Jessup. We knew help was on the way. The Carpathia arrived at around 4 a.m., just as the sun was beginning to rise. I remember being pulled aboard the Carpathia, feeling both grateful and overwhelmed, said Brown. We were given blankets and the crew did everything they could to comfort us. In the days following disasters, people grappled with the emotional aftermath. Many felt guilt for surviving. I struggled with the memories of the night, said McGowan. It was difficult to recall my survival with tragedy that unfolded. The survivor accounts of the Titanic's paint a vivid picture of the emotions, actions, and experiences that defined the tragedy. From the initial excitement of the voyage to the chaos of the sinking. The stories of those who lived through the disaster reveal the resilience of human spirit. The aftermath of the disaster. In the aftermath, before the Carpathia got there, many of the survivors reported feeling a mix of fear and determination as they struggled to survive. The cold was unbearable, but I knew I had to keep swimming, recalled one survivor. I could see others in the water, and I knew we had to hold on. The lifeboats had been launched, and now we're in the water. Crew members in the lifeboats worked tirelessly to pull survivors from the water. But conditions were perilous. We were terrified of capsizing, but we couldn't leave anyone behind, said a lifeboat crew member. The struggle to rescue as many as possible was fraught with difficulty, as the cold water took its toll on those who had been submerged for too long. The RMS Carpathia, a Cunard-Line ship, received the distress call and immediately set sail towards Titanic's last location. Captain Arthur Ralston of Carpathia displayed remarkable leadership, instructing his crew to prepare for rescue operations. The journey to the Titanic's location was not without challenges. The Carpathia faced rough seas and poor visibility, but maintained a steady course, determined to reach the stranded survivors. The Carpathia arrived at the scene of the disaster around 4 a.m., just as dawn was breaking. When we saw the lights of the Carpathia, it felt like a miracle, recalled one survivor. We thought we were going to die. They were pale and shivering, said a crew member. We did everything we could to provide them with blankets and warmth. The Carpathia eventually rescued a total of 705 survivors. The experience was emotionally charged, as many survivors were grieving for loved ones lost in the disaster. The crew member of the Carpathia provided comfort and support, offering food, blankets, and medical attention. As the survivors were brought aboard, they faced the harsh reality of their loss. I remember feeling numb, one survivor recounted. I had survived so many others, and so many others had not. It was a bittersweet moment. The Carpathia was launched in 1902 and was primarily used for Transatlantic passenger service. At the time of the Titanic's disaster, Carpathia was sailing from New York to Europe and had a reputation for safety and comfort. The ship was equipped to carry approximately 1,700 passengers and was known for its efficient and experienced crew. On the night, the Carpathia was anchored in the waters off the coast of Nantucket, and it received a distress call from the Titanic. The ship was under the command of Captain Arthur Ralston, a seasoned mariner who was known for his leadership and quick decision-making. At approximately 12:25, on April 15, 1912, the Titanic set out its first distress signal, which was received by the Carpathia. The message indicated that the Titanic was in great danger and needed immediate assistance. Captain Ralston, upon receiving the call, quickly assessed the situation and made the decision to set course. The ship got underway at once, Captain Ralston ordered his crew. He understood the urgency of the situation and knew that every moment counted. The Carpathia's engines were immediately set in motion, and the ship began its journey through the darkened waters towards the Titanic. The Carpathia was approximately 58 miles from the Titanic's location when it received the call. Navigating through the cold, dark waters of the North Atlantic posed significant challenges, particularly given the icy conditions and the risk of encouraging and encountering icebergs. Captain Ralston was aware of the dangers, but remained steadfast in his determination to reach the Titanic as quickly as possible. Although the crew of the Carpathia worked diligently to prepare the rescue operation. Lifeboats were readied, and medical supplies were gathered to assist any survivors that might need help. The ship's wireless operator, Harold Colton, communicated with Titanic, receiving updates on the situation and relaying vital information to the captain. As the Carpathia made its way through the frigid waters, Captain Ralston issued orders for the ship to increase speed. The urgency of the situation weighed heavily on him. He understood that the lives of many passengers depended on their timely arrival. Around 4 a.m., just as dawn was breaking, the Carpathia arrived. The ship's crew quickly launched lifeboats and began rescue operations, knowing that time was of the essence. Survivors were scattered across the icy waters, clinging to debris or floating in lifeboats, and every moment counted. The first lifeboat was spotted, and the crew of the Carpathia worked tirelessly to pull survivors on board. We were terrified of capsizing, but we couldn't leave anyone behind, recalled one crew member. The Carpathia's crew displayed remarkable bravery and efficiency during the rescue operation. They worked methodically, pulling the survivors from the water and providing them with blankets, food, and medical attention. The atmosphere aboard Carpathia was filled with a mix of relief and sorrow, as crew members recognized the gravity of the loss that occurred. Over the course of the rescue, the Carpathia managed to save a total of 705 survivors. Among them were women and children who had been evacuated from the ship. The crew's dedication to providing care and comfort in such dire circumstances was commendable. Many of the survivors were in shock, both physically and emotionally. The icy waters had taken a toll on those who clung to life in the dark, and the Carpathia's crew worked diligently to assist them. Medical staff attended injuries and provided warmth to those who had been exposed to the elements for too long. Survivors shared their harrowing accounts with the crew as they were brought aboard. Stories of bravery, sacrifice, and loss poured forth, painting a vivid picture of the chaos that unfolded on the Titanic. The crew listened intently, offering comfort and support for those in need. Once the operation was complete, the Carpathia began its journey to New York, carrying the survivors. The ship was filled with a somber atmosphere as those aboard processed the enormity of the disaster. The survivors were grateful to be alive, but the weight of the loss hung heavily in the air. Throughout the journey, the Carpathia's crew continued to provide care and support. Passengers were offered food, and they began to process the trauma of the night. Captain Ralston ensured that the survivors were treated with dignity and respect, understanding the emotional toll of the experience. Upon arrival in New York on April 18th, the Carpathia was met with a mix of curiosity and compassion. Crowds gathered at the docks to witness the arrival of the survivors, and the media quickly descended upon the scene. The stories of Titanic disaster were broadcast across the world, and the Carpathia became a symbol of hope and resilience in the face of tragedy. The legacy of the Carpathia endures as a testament of the bravery and dedication of its crew. The sinking of the Titanic has been subject of extensive investigation, analysis, and speculation. Among those theories proposed to explain the disaster, one of the most intriguing is the mystery ship theory. This theory suggests that another ship was involved in the events leading up to the Titanic's collision, potentially influencing the tragic outcome. While the theory has not been definitely proven, it continues to captivate the imagination of historians, researchers, and enthusiasts alike. The mystery ship theory originated shortly after the Titanic sank. Its investigators, the public sought understanding of the factors that contributed to the disaster. Eyewitness accounts from the survivors and crew members suggested the Titanic had been in the vicinity of other ships at the time of the collision. Some claimed to have seen a light in the distance, leading to the speculation that another vehicle and vessel was nearby when the Titanic struck the iceberg. Additionally, the Titanic received multiple ice warnings from other ships in the area, including the SSS California, which has been reported icebergs and subsequently halted its journey. The notion that a nearby vessel could have played a role in Titanic's fate sparked interest in exploring the possibility of a mystery ship that may have influenced events on the fateful night. One of the key pieces of evidence supporting the mystery ship theory comes from survivor testimonies. Several passengers and crew members reported seeing ship's lights in the distance shortly before Titanic collided with the iceberg. This has led to speculation that another vessel, possibly the Californian or another unidentified ship, was present and could have provided assistance. For instance, some witnesses claimed to have seen a ship that appeared to be stationary, while others reported that the lights were visible on the horizon. Such accounts have fueled the belief that Titanic was not entirely alone in the waters that night. If another ship had been present, it could have played a critical role in the disaster, whether through direct intervention or by contributing to the circumstances that led to the condition. The SSS Californian is often central to the discussions about the mystery ship theory. The Californian was nearby when the Titanic sank and had received ice warnings early in the evening. Captain Stanley Lord of the Californian decided to stop his ship for the night due to the presence of ice. However, he failed to respond to the distress signals sent by Titanic, leading to accusations of negligence and inaction. Survivors from the Titanic reported seeing a ship's light in the distance, which some believed to have been the Californian. However, Captain Lord stated he did not see the Titanic's distress rockets or hear calls for help. The failure of the Californian to assist the Titanic has raised questions about whether another ship was involved and whether Titanic could have been saved if the Californian had responded. Some of the theories propose that Titanic was not alone in its final hours, that another ship, perhaps an unidentified vessel, was present at the time. This other ship hypothesis suggests that this mystery ship may have either contributed to the disaster or could have intervened to assist. Supporters of this theory argue that the presence of another ship could explain why Titanic received multiple ice readings and warnings, but continued to maintain its speed. If the crew believed that they were in the vicinity of another vessel that could assist them, they might have felt more secure in their navigations. The communication between ships on the night of the disaster is also a focal point. The Titanic's radio operators were busy sending passenger messages, which may have limited their ability to receive critical distress signals from other vessels. If another ship had been nearby, the inability to communicate effectively could have hindered any potential rescue efforts. Additionally, the failure of Carpathian to respond to Titanic's distress signals raises questions about the effectiveness of maritime communication protocols at the time. If Titanic had been able to communicate more effectively, it might have received timely assistance. While the mystery ship theory remains speculative, several pieces of evidence have been cited to support it. These include numerous survivor accounts. The SS Californian was within reasonable distance of the Titanic. The fact it did not respond to the distress signals had led to ongoing scrutiny of Captain Lord's actions. Some proponents of the mystery ship theory argue that if the Carpathian had been more responsive, it could have played a critical role in rescuing the survivors. The inquiries following the disaster revealed inconsistencies and gaps in records of communications. Despite the intrigue surrounding the mystery ship theory, many historians and experts remain skeptical. Criticals argue while eyewitness accounts can provide valuable insights, they're not always reliable, especially with high-stress situations. The chaos and confusion had likely affected the passengers' perceptions of the event. The Canadian inquiry into the Titanic disaster, as we'll find out later, found that the Californian had acted within maritime regulations at the time by stopping for ice. Captain Lord's decision to not respond to the Titanic distress signals has been criticized, and by some argue that he believed the lights he saw were from Titanic itself. This capitulates the narrative, as it suggests the Californian was not entirely negligent, but rather caught in a misunderstanding of intention. The recovery of the dead. On April 17th, 1912, just 2 days after the sinking, the McKenny Bennett set sail from Halifax, Nova Scotia, with a crew specifically tasked with retrieving bodies. The ship was equipped with supplies, including coffins, as well as trained personnel, including a morgue attendant and physician, to handle the deceased. The recovery mission faced numerous obstacles. The icy waters of the North Atlantic were inhospitable, and the search area was vast. The cruise ship used grappling hooks and nets to try and retrieve bodies, but the ocean's currents and the sheer depth of the water made recovery challenging. Despite these difficulties, McKenny Bennett managed to recover 306 bodies over the course. Once the bodies were retrieved, the next step was to handle the remains. The crew of the McKenny Bennett prepared the bodies for burial, placing them in coffins and marking them with identification. The ship returned to Halifax on April 30th with 190, many of which were buried in Fairview Lawn Cemetery. The city became the final resting place of many Titanic victims. The several gravestones marked with names, while others remained anonymous. The identification process was painstaking. The public had been informed of recovery efforts, and several families traveled to Halifax in hopes of finding their loved ones. The local authorities coordinated with the McKenny Bennett's crew to facilitate these identifications and to manage the overwhelming number of grieving families. Despite the best efforts of recovery times, many bodies were never recovered. The ocean depths, the currents, and the sheer volume of victims made it impossible to retrieve anyone. In total, only about 340 of the over 1,500 victims were accounted for. Environmental factors also played a significant role in the limitations of the recovery efforts. The cold waters of the North Atlantic delayed decomposition, but they also created hazardous conditions for divers and recovery teams. Moreover, the psychological toll on the crews involved in the recovery cannot be understated. Many faced emotional challenge of dealing with the grief of the families and the trauma of the event itself. At the time of the Titanic's disaster, the technology for underwater search and recovery was rudimentary at best. The deep-sea capabilities of ships like the McKinney Bennett were limited, and there was no modern tools like remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, or advanced sonar systems to assist in locating the wreckage or the victims. This lack of technology significantly hampered recovery efforts. It wasn't until decades later that advancements in underwater exploration technology would allow a more effective searches of the shipwrecks and recovery of remains. The Titanic itself would not be located until 1895, and the recovery of artifacts and remains would take place in subsequent years, highlighting the challenges that the initial recovery teams faced. To help with identification, embalming was performed on many of the recovered bodies to delay the decomposition and facilitate the identification. The ship's morgue attendant, a man named John E. Smith, played a critical role in preparing the bodies for burial. The crew members recorded details about each body, including clothing, personal items, and identifying marks on the bodies which were critical for later identification for the families. The emotional toll of the recovery mission was profound. The crew of the McKinney Bennett was accurately aware of the gravity of their task. They were not just retrieving bodies, they were providing closure for the grieving families who had lost loved ones in this tragedy. Each body was treated with dignity and respect, reflecting the humanity that permeated the rescue mission. The ship's crew faced the heavy, heart-wrenching task of dealing with families waiting for news. Many families traveled to Halifax in hopes of identifying their loved ones, and the crew worked diligently to facilitate these identifications. The return of the McKinney Bennett to Halifax on April 30th with 190 bodies was a bittersweet moment. A somber reminder of the tragedy, but also a source of solace for some families. Upon returning to Halifax, the recovered bodies were buried at the Fairview Lawn Cemetery and their local cemeteries. The city became a final resting place of many of the victims. The several gravestones were marked with names, others remained anonymous. We are now going to delve into the multifaceted process of identifying the bodies recovered from the Titanic disaster, highlighting the techniques used and individual involvement and the broader scale implications of this event. When the Titanic sank, the first response came from, as we know, the RMS Carpathia, which rescued 705 survivors. However, no bodies were recovered at this time, as the focus was on saving lives. Within days, the Canadian government recognized the need for coordinated recovery effort of the deceased. The cable ship McKinney Bennett was dispatched from Halifax, equipped with deep-sea operations. Upon reaching the site of the sinking, the crew began the grim task of searching for and recovering bodies. Over the course of its mission, it recovered 306 bodies. The identification process would prove to be one of the most challenging aspects of the recovery efforts. The first challenge in identifying the Titanic's victims was, the state of the bodies recovered. Many were found in advanced stages of decomposition, which complicated the identification process. The cold waters of the North Atlantic delayed it to some extent, but the conditions were still harsh. The bodies were often bloated and discolored, making it difficult to recognize them. The crew of the McKinney Bennett was trained to handle such situations, and they utilized various methods to prepare the bodies. They brought coffins and embalming fluids aboard to preserve the remains as much as possible. Embalming was performed on board to prevent further decomp, allowing time for the identification efforts to take place. Now we're going to look at the identification and how it was done. The first step in the identification process was a thorough physical exam of the bodies. The crew examined the clothing, personal belongings, and any distinguishing marks Items such as jewelry, watches, and clothing, labels often provided vital clues. In some cases, the bodies carried personal effects that could be traced back to their owners. The crew of the McKinney Bennett meticulously documented every detail regarding the bodies that they had recovered. They maintained records that included description of the clothing, physical characteristics, and any personal items found with the deceased. Each body was assigned a number and labeled accordingly, which helped organize the identification process. The ship's morgue attendant, a physician, played critical roles in this documentation. They would write down details in a logbook, which later served as a reference for identifying the bodies. This record-keeping provided essential when families arrived in Halifax seeking information about their loved ones. Once the McKinney Bennett returned to Halifax with their bodies, the identification process continued on land. The families and friends of the victims were informed and invited to the city to identify their loved ones. Many traveled great distances, filled with the hope and dread. Local authorities coordinated efforts to facilitate these identifications. The families were shown the bodies, and they were asked to identify them based on personal characteristics, clothing, and any other identifiable marks. This process was emotionally charged and often traumatic for those involved, as they had to confront the reality of their loss. The local government and community played a significant role in the identification process. Halifax became a hub for families of the victims, and the city was flooded with those seeking closure. Local officials and volunteers worked tirelessly to assist the families during this difficult time. Cemeteries, such as Fairview, became a final resting place of many of the victims. The city established a system to record the identities of those buried, and the graves were marked accordingly. Some graves were marked with names, while others remained anonymous, highlighting the difficulties faced in the identification process. The process of identifying the dead was also influenced by cultural and social factors of the time. The tragedy affected people from various backgrounds, and identifying of the deceased was often carried significant weight for the families and communities. The sociological status of the victims and their nationality and their personal stories all played a role in how they were remembered. Titanic was famously known as a floating palace, catering to wealthy elite. The class distinctions on the ship were stark, with first class enjoying luxurious amenities, while third class faced overcrowded. For the wealthier passengers, the identification process was often more straightforward. Families could employ private investigators or engage local office officials to expedite the identification of their loved ones. In contrast, the families of third-class passengers faced more significant challenges. Many of these individuals were immigrants who had traveled to America for a better life. Their loss was often less publicized, and their family had fewer resources to aid in the identification process. The Titanic's disaster captured the world's attention, and media coverage played a critical role in shaping the public's perception. Newspapers published articles detailing the recovery efforts and identification process, often sensationalizing the tragedy. This coverage not only highlighted the plight of the victims, but also created a sense of urgency for the identification efforts. The media's portrayal of the disaster influenced how the public perceived the victims. Stories of heroism, sacrifice, and tragedy resonated with readers, leading to widespread sympathy for the families. This public interest in the identification process further motivated local authorities and volunteers to assist those in need. Despite the best efforts of recovery teams, local authorities and family, the identification process was fraught with challenges. The sheer number of victims, the conditions of the body, and the emotional toll on the families made the task daunting. Ultimately, not all the bodies could be identified. Of the approximately 1,500 individuals who perished, only about 340 bodies were recovered. Out of these, many remained unidentified due to lack of identifiable features or personal belongings. Some bodies were buried in a mass grave and marked only as unknown or unidentified. The loss of identity for those victims was profoundly tragic in itself. The families were left to grieve without closure, as they could never be sure their loved ones' fates. This certainly weighed heavily on many families for years to come. The emotional toll of the identification process was significant for both families and recovery teams. For families, the process of identifying a loved one meant confronting the harsh reality of their loss. Many experienced overwhelming grief, while others felt the guilt of having survived or for not being able to do more to help their loved ones. The recovery teams, meanwhile, faced the psychological burden of dealing with death on such a massive scale. The emotional strain of handling the deceased and witnessing the pain of the families took its toll on many individuals involved in the recovery and identification efforts. The process of identifying the Titanic's dead had long-term implications on maritime safety, burial practices, and community response. Now, I have to put a warning up. This is going to get graphic. It's about embalming now. So if you don't like to hear about how dead are preserved, please just skip ahead to the next section. We're now going to look at how the McKinney Bennett was able to preserve the bodies for identification through embalming. Embalming involves the preservation of human remains and the delay of decomposition, allowing for the dignified handling of bodies for burial or transportation. During the early 20th century, embalming practices were becoming more common, particularly in North America, where they were often employed for the deceased to be viewed during funerals. Given the circumstances surrounding the Titanic disaster, where many bodies were recovered under tragic conditions, embalming was critical for both hygienic reasons and to provide a semblance of dignity to the deceased. Upon recovery, the bodies were brought on board. The process was not only technical, but also performed under emotional and often distressing conditions. And once the body was recovered, it was taken to a designated area aboard the McKinney Bennett. The first step was cleaning the body, which is essential for the preservation process. The crew, often consisting of morticians, would wash the remains with antiseptics to prevent infection and prepare the body for embalming. The primary substances used in embalming is formaldehyde, a chemical that serves to slow down the decomposition process. In the early 1900s, various formulations of embalming fluids were used, often containing formaldehyde along with other chemicals like methanol, ethanol, and water. The choice of chemicals was based on the efficiency and, available resources. The morticians aboard the McKinney Bennett would have relied on their training and expertise to select the most appropriate embalming fluids. The embalming process typically involves an arterial injection where the embalming fluid is introduced into the circulatory system. On the McKinney Bennett, this would have been done using a gravity-fed system or hand pump to introduce the fluid into the arteries. The morticians would make an incision, often in the neck or femoral area, to access the arteries. The fluid would then be injected, ensuring that it circulated throughout the body to preserve its tissues. After the arterial injection, the next step involved was treating the body cavities. This process involved puncturing the abdominal cavity using a suction device to remove bodily fluids and gases that could lead to decomposition. After the cavity was emptied, the morticians would introduce a concentrated embalming fluid directly into the cavities, ensuring a thorough preservation. Once the embalming fluid had been injected and the body cavities treated, the morticians would suture the incisions closed. They'd also dress the bodies respectively, often in clothing provided by the families or suitable garments that were available. This act was critical for maintaining the dignity of the deceased. Now, let's look at the burial and memorialization of the bodies. First, we're going to touch on burial at sea. It has its roots and can be traced back to ancient civilizations. Historically, maritime cultures such as Greeks, Romans, and, of course, the mighty Vikings practiced sea burials because they viewed the ocean as a sacred space. For instance, the Greeks would often place the bodies of their dead in boats, accompanied by offerings, before setting them adrift to ensure safe passage to the afterlife. The Vikings famously sent their deceased warriors off in grand ceremonies, often in ships, further establishing the ocean as a final resting place. In modern times, burial at sea became formalized, particularly for military personnel and those with maritime connections. The U.S. Navy and other military branches have specific protocols for sea burials, reflecting the respect afforded to service members. Burial on land has been a traditional method of interment across most cultures. The practice dates back to prehistoric times, with evidence of burial mounds and grave sites found in archaeological records. Land burial is often tied to the concept of returning to the earth, with many cultures believing that a physical resurrection or spiritual connection to the land. Over the centuries, land burial evolved into various forms, including graveyards, cemeteries, and mausoleums, often accompanied by rituals, ceremonies that reflect the beliefs and values of the community. Now, the legal framework for governing burial at sea varies from country to country, and it's also influenced by international maritime law. In the U.S., the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, regulates sea burials under the Marine Protection Research and Sanitaries Act, or MPRSA. Specific guidelines dictate that burials should occur at least 3 nautical miles from land, and that the body must be unembalmed and prepared in an environmentally friendly manner. Internationally, the London Convention and Protocol on the Preservation of Marine Pollution by Dumping of Wastes and Other Matter also plays a role in regulating sea burials, emphasizing the need to protect maritime environments. Land burials, as a counter, are also subject to local and national regulations, which can include zoning laws, health regulations, and cemetery management rules. Many countries have specific guidelines regarding the depth of graves, types of caskets, and the maintenance of the burial sites. These regulations are typically designed to ensure public health and safety, as well as to maintain the dignity of the deceased. Now, culturally, burial at sea is often associated with themes of freedom and adventure, and the tie between humanity and the ocean. Many maritime cultures view the sea as a final journey, reflecting the belief in the cyclical nature of life and death. For those with strong connection to the ocean, such as fishermen, sailors, and naval personnel, burial at sea can serve as a poignant tribute, allowing loved ones to remain connected to the water. In some cultures, sea burials are accompanied by rituals, such as prayers, songs, or a scattering of flowers. Those practices highlight the emotional and spiritual dimensions of the burial process, underscoring the significance of honoring the deceased. Now, burial on land is imbued with cultural religious meanings and is very widely across societies. For many cultures, burial in land represents the return to the earth, symbolizing regeneration and continuity. In Christianity, for instance, burial is consecrated ground is significant, reflecting beliefs about resurrection and eternal life. Now, rituals surrounding land burials often include elaborate ceremonies such as wakes, funerals, and memorial services. These events provide an opportunity for the community mourning and remembrance, enabling families and friends to come together to honor the deceased. Now, from an environmental standpoint, burial at sea can be viewed as a sustainable option, particularly when considered in accordance with regulations. The ocean is a vast ecosystem, and when bodies are buried or scattered, respectively, they can contribute to marine life. Natural decomposition occurs in the manner that supports the food chain, and many cultures believe that returning the bodies to the sea is a way of nourishing the earth. However, there are concerns regarding the impact of human remains on marine ecosystems, particularly in areas with high human activity. The use of embalming fluids and non-biodegradable caskets can pose risk to marine lives. Land burial can have significant environmental implications as well. particularly concerning land use and resource consumption. Traditional burial practices often involved in these use of caskets, vaults, and embalming fluids have contributed to the depletion of natural resources and, the pollution of soil and groundwater. The rise of green burials, where bodies are interred in biodegradable materials without embalming, has emerged as a response to these environmental concerns. Green burial practices emphasize the return to the natural processes, allowing for the body's decomposition to enrich the soil and support local ecosystems. Now, choosing burial at sea is often deeply personal. It's influenced by individual beliefs, values, and connection to the ocean. For those who spent their lives at sea have profound love for maritime environments. Families may find comfort in the idea of their loved ones returning to the ocean, where they can be free at rest. However, the decision can also be met with mixed emotions. Families may grapple with loss and the finality of the act. Land burial is often more traditional, and it's often aligned with culture and religious practices, providing a sense of familiarity and comfort. The ability to visit a gravesite can be an important aspect of the grieving process, allowing the family members to pay their respects and maintain the connection to their loved one. Now, we'll look at the memorial services that were held. Many families held personal memorial services in the local communities for the Titanic victims. These gatherings often took place in churches, homes, or community centers, and were characterized by intimate settings that allowed for personal reflection. The remembrance of in these services, family members shared stories about the deceased and celebrated their lives. For example, in the States, numerous churches held special services to honor the victims. These services, including prayers, hymns, and readings, provided solace in a time of profound loss. Families would often invite friends and community members to join them, creating a sense of solidarity and shared mourning. Beyond local gatherings, public memorial services were organized to honor the collective loss of life. One of the most significant public memorials occurred in New York on April 19th, 1912, just days after the sinking. The service was held in the Church of the Transfiguration, also known as Little Church Around the Corner, and it was attended by prominent figures of the time, including dignitaries, clergy, and general public. The service featured prominent speeches that highlighted the heroism of the crew and the humanity of the passengers. It served as a unifying event, bringing together a diverse group of people who were affected by the tragedy. Wherever, directly or indirectly, the emotional weight of the ceremony resonated deeply with attendees. Various organizations, including Titanic Relief Fund and other charitable groups, organized memorial services to honor victims. These services often aimed to provide support and assistance to families of the deceased. For instance, the Titanic Relief Fund was established to aid survivors and the families of those who perished, and part of their efforts included memorial services. These gatherings were often marked by speeches, fundraising efforts, and distribution of literature about the tragedy. They served to raise awareness of the needs of the survivors and the families left behind, fostering a sense of community and action in the face of grief. A central theme in the memorial services for the Titanic victims was the commemoration of lives lost. Speakers often shared personal anecdotes and stories that highlighted the character, achievements, and dreams of the deceased. This storytelling aspect allowed attendees to connect on a personal level, transforming the memorial from a mere acknowledgement of the death into a celebration of life. For instance, during the public memorial service in New York, many speakers took the opportunity to highlight the diverse background of the passengers, from wealthy to immigrants. This acknowledgement underscored the tragedy's far-reaching impact, affecting people from all walks of life. Another common theme was a sense of unity and solidarity among the mourners. The shared experience of grief fostered a collective identity, transcending individual loss. The services provided space for people to come together, to share their sorrows and support one another. The theme was especially evident in the public memorial services where large crowds gathered to honor the deceased. One of the most enduring memorials dedicated to the Titanic's victim is the Titanic Memorial located in New York. This memorial was designed by architect Ernest C. O'Brien and was erected in 1913 at the western end of Hudson River Park. The monument features a tall obelisk topped with a statue of a woman, symbolizing the lost souls of the Titanic. Halifax, Nova Scotia became the final resting place for many of the victims. The site is frequently visited by descendants of the Titanic and enthusiasts, serving as a place of quiet reflection and remembrance. Memorial services are held annually, drawing attention to the impact of the tragedy on the local community and the families of the deceased. Now, one of the most famous poems coming out. It's entitled The Wreck of the Titanic, and it is by Benjamin Peck Keith, and it was done, I believe, in 1912. Out of Southampton she swung with a stream, a poem of iron and steel, securely feel, for no one saw death as he stood at the wheel, directing her course through the echo's shore, her first and last haven of nevermore. She was the last best work of men. On her first voyage was speeding when, out of darkness, out of the night, loomed an ominous form of ghostly white. 'Twas a towering mountain of ice gigantic, as ever is seen on the North Atlantic. She struck with a shiver from stem to stern, and was rapidly sinking, all soon to learn. Then Captain Smith, her brave commander, thought not one moment his own life to save, but stood on the bridge, calling out to the crew, "Remember your country, be British, be true!" And England and Ireland and Scotland and Wales, provided there to the world, their valor never fails. Women and children first was their cry, and every one of the crew stood by. The boats were lowered and sent away, that cut off all hope, save eternity. And the Titanic sank from sight beneath the sea, while her band played near, my God, to thee. Was there ever a scene so awfully grand as the sinking ship with her playing band? All glory to Smith and Titanic's men, they bring Trafalgar's heroes to memory again. And that heart-thrilling tale of the Alamo, the last grand charge at Waterloo, and the charge of the Light Brigade as well, and Jimmy Bousteau's act on Prairie Belle, and those on the corridors of all time, the Titanic story shall sound sublime, for never was courage more notable and true than was shown on the night by Titanic's crew. In addition to the memorials dedicated to the victims, the Titanic Memorial Lighthouse in Cobourg, Ireland stands as a tribute to the ship's last port of call. The lighthouse, built in 2000, is situated at the entrance of Cobourg Harbour and serves as a beacon, not only for maritime navigation, but also remembrance. The lighthouse features a plaque commemorating the Titanic and its passengers, reminding visitors of the ship's tragic fate. The location holds particular significance, as Cobourg was the last stop for many passengers before embarking on their ill-fated journey. The lighthouse symbolizes the hope and resilience, standing tall against the backdrop of the ocean, much like the spirit of those who were lost. Various museums have dedicated sections or entire exhibits to Titanic, serving as long-term memorials through education and remembrance. The Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee is one such establishment. This museum features interactive exhibits, artifacts, and personal stories of passengers and crew members, allowing visitors to engage with the history of the Titanic in a meaningful way. The museum not only honors the memory of those who perished, but also educates the public about maritime safety, engineering advancements, and the socio-economic context of the early 20th century, providing a comprehensive understanding of Titanic's story. The museum fosters a sense of connection to the past and encourages reflection on the lessons learned from the tragedy. Many institutions have also developed educational programs that focus on the Titanic disaster, emphasizing its historical significance and the importance of maritime safety. These programs often include workshops, lectures, and community events aimed at raising awareness about the event and its impact on society. Schools and universities, many incorporate the Titanic into their curricula, exploring themes of engineering, human behavior, and the ethics of safety regulations. By educating future generations about the disaster, these initiatives ensure that the memory of Titanic and its victims remain. Annual memorial services are also held at various locations around the world to honor their victims. In addition to the memorial services, events organized and other locations connected to the Titanic journey, these gatherings create a sense of community and shared remembrance, allowing participants to connect with others who share the interest. On April 15th, it's observed as Titanic Remembrance Day, a day dedicated to honoring the lives of the lost. Many organizations organize events, candlelight vigils, and educational programs. Titanic Remembrance Day fosters a sense of solidarity among those who remember the victims and reinforce the idea that their story should never be forgotten. Events held on this day often include moments of silence, reading from survivor accounts, and discussions about the ongoing relevance of maritime safety. The Titanic disaster has inspired countless works of literature, art, and media. For instance, novels such as A Night to Remember by Walter Lord, and the more recent works like The Light Between the Oceans, have captured the essence of Titanic experience. Also, the movie Titanic by James Cameron, the newest movie in the telling of the Titanic story. Now we will look at the investigations and inquiries. There was 3 major ones, one British, one in the US, and one in Canada. We will talk briefly about each of them. Pretty well, each of them came to the same conclusions and same setup for things that was put in place for maritime safety. First, we're going to explore the British inquiry. Now, the Titanic was hailed as a marvel of modern engineering, built by Harland and Wolff. The inquiry, which was held and led by Lord Mercer, began May 2nd, 1912, just weeks after the sinking. The inquiry aimed to determine the cause of the disaster, evaluate the actions of the ship's officers and crew, and assess the adequacy of existing maritime safety regulations. Now, the inquiry featured testimonials from various stakeholders, which included survivors, crew members, expert witnesses, and this inquiry came to their conclusions and produced a comprehensive report and published it in July 1912. Some of the key findings are design flaws. The inquiry concluded that Titanic's design, while advanced, had significant flaws. The watertight compartments were not as effective as intended, and the water could spill out from over one compartment to the other, which is what happened. The big one, insufficient lifeboats. It was determined that Titanic did not carry enough lifeboats for all passengers and crew. The ship only had 20 lifeboats, which could accommodate around 1,200 people, despite having over 2,200 on board. The other was speed and navigation. The inquiry found that the ship was traveling at a high speed in icy waters, which was deemed reckless, and given the prevailing conditions. Captain Smith was criticized for not heeding the iceberg warnings and slowing down. Emergency response. The inquiry highlighted the inadequate emergency response during the sinking. Lifeboats were launched partially filled, and there was confusion among passengers and crew regarding evacuation procedures. Now, regulatory failures. The inquiry pointed out to the failures in maritime regulation, noting that existing laws allowed for the insufficient number of lifeboats and did not mandate specific safety protocols. The inquiry's findings provided immediate calls for reform in response to the Titanic disaster. Several key recommendations were made. 1. Lifeboat recommendations. The inquiry recommended that all passenger ships be required to carry enough lifeboats to accommodate every member, passenger, and crew on board, regardless of the ship's size. Safety regulations, it was urged the establishment of a more stringent safety regulations, including mandatory safety drills, improved communication systems on board. Ice Patrol. The inquiry recommended that the establishment of an international ice patrol to monitor iceberg locations and provide warnings to vessels navigating through the icy-prone waters. The Maritime Safety Board. The formation of an independent Maritime Safety Board was proposed to oversee shipping practices and ensure compliance with safety regulations. The inquiry into the Titanic disaster had profound and lasting effects on maritime law. These recommendations led to an International Convention for the Safety of Sea, the SOLAS, in 1914. For lifeboat mandates, it was put in exactly what they recommended. Improved communication. The disaster highlighted the need for improvement and advancement in technology and protocols for emergency communication. In other words, what they did was, instead of having one line for everything, they put in a dedicated one channel, if you will, for emergencies and then all others. An international cooperation. Titanic disaster underscored the importance of international cooperation in marine safety, leading to ongoing collaboration among nations and enhanced safety standards and shared information. Beyond the regulatory changes, the Titanic disaster and subsequent inquiries had significant cultural and social implications. Public awareness. The tragedy raised public awareness about maritime safety and responsibility of shipping companies, leading to increased scrutiny of maritime practices. Media coverage. The inquiry received extensive media coverage, influencing public perception of the shipping industry and sparking debates about corporate responsibility and accountability. Memorialization. The Titanic became an enduring symbol of human hubris, the need for vigilance and safety practices. Memorials and cultural representations, including films, literature, have ensured that the lessons of the disaster remain relevant. The advocacy for passenger rights. The disaster galvanized advocacy for passenger rights, leading to greater emphasis on accountability and transparency in the cruise and shipping industries. The disaster sent shockwaves around the world, prompting outrage in the U.S. Public interest was intense, particularly among the families of the American victims. The U.S. Senate, recognizing the importance of the event, decided to conduct its own inquiry, separate from the British one led by Lord Magistrate. The American inquiry was initiated by the U.S. Senate on April 19, 1912, again just days after the disaster. The inquiry was led by Senator William Smith of Michigan, who was appointed to the chair of the committee. The inquiry focused on determining the cause, just like the British one. The inquiry took place in two locations: New York, where many survivors were located, and Washington, where the Senate hearings were held. The inquiry featured testimonials, again from the same witnesses, including survivors, crew members, and experts. They came to the same conclusions as the British one, so I'm not going to go into exactly the same thing. Again, it's the exact same as what the British found and proposed. Now, Canadians being Canadians, and the final resting place being Halifax, the Canadian government at the time also initiated its own inquiry, which was started May 1st, 1912, again shortly after the disaster. This inquiry was led by Senator J.A. McCallum, who was appointed to chair the proceedings. It was aimed to investigate the events leading to the sinking and to assess the response of companies involved, including the White Star Line. The proceedings and inquiry took place in Ottawa and featured testimonials from various stakeholders, including survivors, officials from White Star Line, and maritime experts. The same findings, again, were found. Again, the big one seems to be in all three: insufficient lifeboats and communication failure. Now, the cultural impact. The Titanic story has been reinterpreted in various artistic forms, reflecting the societal values, human emotions, and the complexities of ambition and vulnerability. In the immediate aftermath, a wave of literature emerged, including first-hand accounts and fictional retellings. One of the earliest noble works was Morgan Robertson's novella Futility, published in 1998, which is eerie, foretold the sinking of a ship called the Titan. 1898. This work encapsulated the themes of hubris and the limits of human engineering. Following the disaster, numerous survivor accounts were published, providing personal insights. One of the most well-known books is A Night to Remember by Walter Lord, published in 1955. It became a sentimental text, not only chronicling the events of the night, but also humanized the tragedy. The Titanic became a powerful symbol in literature, representing the fragility of human ambition and the tragic consequence of overconfidence. The voyage of the Titanic, often described as unsinkable ship, serves as a cautionary tale about technological ignorance. As quoted in Jurassic Park by Dr. Ian Malcolm, we really got to stop and think, and this Titanic test really gave us the ability to really step back and think, just because we can do something, should we? Some other books were Titanic, A Ship Magnificent. Titanic's narratives often delves into the complexities of human relationship, particularly of love and sacrifice. The ship has been depicted as a stage, and romantic entanglements as seen in the works like Titanic, the musical. The musical presents characters from different sociological backgrounds and juxtaposition of personal stories against the backdrop of the collective catastrophic that allows audiences to explore the human condition in a nuanced way. The most iconic adaptation of the story, and most recent, is James Cameron's Titanic in 1997. It became a cultural phenomenon. The film combined with historical events with a fictional love story between characters Jack and Rose, played by Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. The film successfully lay not only with its stunning visuals and its special effects, but also in its ability to invoke empathy for its characters, making the tragedy relatable to contemporary audiences. Cameron's film revitalized the interest in Titanic, leading to renowned scholarly and public fascination with the ship. It sparked numerous documentaries. It's one of the reasons why I'm doing the documentary now. The film's emotional depth and historical accuracy brought new life, encouraging discussions about ethics of remembrance, the nature of heroism, and the sociological impacts of class structure. Now, let's look at the Titanic's legacy, the legacy of the Titanic. In the aftermath, multiple investigations. One of the most significant outcomes was, of course, the establishment of SOLAS in 1914, as well as implementing lifeboat requirements. And with this, they also came with specific life-saving appliances. It also highlighted the dangers posed by icy waters, particularly in the North Atlantic. In response, the International Ice Patrol was established in 1914. Under the auspice of the U.S. Coast Guard, the Ice Patrol's primary mission was to monitor and report on icebergs and other hazards in the North Atlantic shipping lanes. The initiative aimed to prove and provide ships with timely information, allowing them to navigate safely through the potentially dangerous areas. The Titanic's sinking also underscored the critical importance of effective communication at sea. In response to maritime regulations, they were revised to require that all passenger ships be equipped with radio equipment capable of operating continuously, like I said before, have this separate channel. The Titanic's design flaws, including the use of substandard materials and inadequate lifeboats, led to the reevaluation of ship design and construction standards. Regulatory bodies began to impose stricter guidelines concerning materials used in the shipbuilding process. It also highlighted the need for more rigorous oversight, and that's where the regulatory barrier came in, including safety drills for everybody on board. For decades, the ship's final resting place remained a mystery. It wasn't until September 1st, 1985, that Robert Ballard and his team located the wreck using advanced sonar technology and remote-operated vehicles, ROVs. The discovery revealed a haunting, poignant sight. The ship split into two main sections, approximately 1,970 feet, 600 meters. The cold temperatures and high pressure at such depths have preserved many artifacts, but they've also contributed to the gradual decay of the ship's structure. The Titanic wreck site is characterized by its vast, eerie landscape, with the ship resting on the ocean floor in two main sections, the bow and the stern. The bow is relatively well preserved, while the stern is more fragmented due to the impact on the ocean floor and the forces of nature. The ship's exterior is covered in a thick layer of marine growth and rusticles, the rust formations that create bacteria and feed on the iron of the ship. These rusticles can be several feet and contribute to the deterioration of the vessel over time. The site is also home to various marine life, including fish, crustaceans, and other organisms that thrive in cold, dark places, and preserve of life around the wreck serves as a poignant reminder of the nature of resilience even amidst human tragedy. Preserving the Titanic's wreck has been fraught with challenges, primarily due to the deep sea environment and the ongoing deterioration of the ship. Several factors contribute to the site's vulnerability. Natural decay. The wreck is subject to natural decay process, including corrosion from salt water and the effects of pressure and temperature. The presence of rust-eating bacteria accelerates the breakdown of the ship's material and metal structure, leading to the gradual collapse of its remains, and the fact it's 113 years old. Human intervention. The Titanic has attracted numerous expeditions, many of which involve the recovery of artifacts. Some of these recoveries are aimed at preservation and education. Others have raised ethical concerns regarding the disturbance of a grave site. Each intervention potentially accelerates the decay of the ship and alters its condition. Tourism and salvage. The Titanic wreck has become a site of significant interest for researchers, historians, and tourists. Submergible tours and expeditions have increased traffic to the site, raising concerns about the impact of human activity on the wreck. The tension between exploration and preservation has led to ongoing debates regarding the ethical implications of accessing such a sensitive site. In light of the challenges faced in the Titanic wreck, several preservation efforts have been initiated to protect this historical site and its artifacts. The big one being legal protections. The Titanic wreck site is protected under various laws and agreements. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization has recognized Titanic as a site of cultural significance. Additionally, the Titanic Maritime Memorial Act of 1986 helps regulate salvage operations and promotes the preservation of the wreck. Scientific research. Ongoing research efforts were aimed to better understand the decay process affecting the Titanic. Marine archaeologists and scientists study the site to gather data on the ship and its conditions and the impact of microorganisms on the structure. This research informs preservation strategies and helps mitigate further deterioration. Public awareness. Many organizations, including museums and academic institutions, are dedicated to educating the public about the Titanic and its wreck. Exhibitions featuring artifacts recovered from the site aim to tell the story, while emphasizing the importance of preservation. Ethical guidelines of exploration. The growing awareness of ethical implications of exploring shipwrecks has led to the development of guidelines and best practices for underwater archaeology. These guidelines advocate for minimal intervention, emphasizing documentation and remote observation over physical recovery. As we look to the future, the preservation of the Titanic wreck site remains a complex issue. The ship is deteriorating, and while efforts are being made to protect it, the reality is time is not on our side. The balance between exploration and education and preservation will continue to be the topic of discussion among historians, scientists, and all. Technological advancements in underwater exploration may offer new ways to study and monitor the wreck without causing harm. For instance, remote sensing technologies and advanced imaging techniques can provide detailed information about the condition of the wreck without the need for direct intervention. Now, let's wrap all this up. The Titanic symbolizes the technological advancements of the early 1900s, reflecting an era of optimistic belief in progress and human ingenuity. However, its luxury also highlighted the stark social divisions of the time. This stratification has become a focal point in discussions about the social dynamics of the early 20th century. The sinking and extreme loss of life has prompted many regulatory changes to marine safety. And it also continues to spark ongoing discussions about class, disparity, privilege, and social values, as well as maritime laws. The Titanic's cultural significance extends beyond entertainment. It serves as a lens through which we examine human behavior in the face of disaster and stories of heroism, sacrifice, and tragedy that emerged. The Titanic has become a powerful symbol of the fragility of life and the unpredictability of fate. As we reflect on Titanic's impact, we are reminded of the lessons it imparts about progress, responsibility, and human experience. The Titanic story is not merely about a ship that sank. It is a multifaceted narrative that invites us to contemplate our values, our history, and our future. The enduring fascination with Titanic ensures that its significance will not be forgotten, serving as a poignant reminder of a moment in history that shaped the world we live in today. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Please like and subscribe. These videos take a long time to make. Please also comment. Love to hear from you about what other videos besides the Irish history you would like to see featured. Also, please note that all sources and material that was used is linked in the description.